evening. I'd like to introduce you to three of our creative team. Jack A. Smith, who is our fabulous costume designer for both parts of Nicholas Nickleby. Philip Engel, who is our composer for a lot of the music that you will hear tonight in the show. And Chris Niess, who is a co-director for Nicholas Nickleby. I also have a very, very special guest that I would like to introduce you all to. We have Charles Dickens himself.
You're far too kind, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here on a whirlwind American tour for the year. I'll be making my way around the country to visit your charming states, celebrating my life apparently over the next year. They've cleverly called What the Dickens. It's a cultural event which will be taking place throughout the region, and also going to the students so they become lovers of my work. Why shouldn't they, of course? So this will be a very exciting time. Of course, what better way to start than a theatrical production of my third novel, The Life and Adventures of Nicholas Nickleby. And do make sure you pick up a copy of Master Humphrey's Clock. It'll be coming out with a new serial about a young lady, nearly 14, named Nell Trent, called The Old Curiosity Shop. I hope you enjoy that as well.
We are very excited to have you.
Welcome.
Is this your first time actually seeing Nicholas Nickleby on stage?
Yes, it's very exciting to have it adapted to the stage.
Well, then also let us know what you think.
It's appropriate considering Mr. Nickleby has some moments on in the theatre.
Yes, very true. So tonight we're here just to have an informal discussion with our designers, our creative team, and they're going to talk a little bit about their process. This show has been, oh my gosh, almost 2 years in the making. So since it was, 3 years since it was kind of a gleam in Mr. Jim Helsinger's eyes. So we definitely want to talk about how it was created, and then talk about what you're going to see on stage a little bit tonight, and open it up to you as well. If you have any thoughts, if you have any questions, if there's anything you want to know more about, please don't be shy, raise your hand, shout out, whatever, and we'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
The baby excited?
The baby has been kicking all night. She's so happy. I have 10 more weeks, so she is definitely active in there right now. I'll let you know. If you guys say something really good, she'll respond. She's the best judge. So, Chris?
I can kick it off, sure.
Yeah, let's start.
I just jotted down a few things, some interesting things about the production. Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah, of course.
It is definitely an extreme, immense pleasure, as well as a privilege to speak before you from this perspective. This production, as Melissa told you, has been going on really for quite some time in its development. It started out with a long chain of pragmatic planning, and it was tipped with a flurry of teams of personnel, technological equipment, and impassioned action. And if that doesn't satisfy the metaphor of giving birth, well, I don't know. We're very, I must say, first off, very extremely thankful to our generous sponsors who've enabled this benchmark of a production of the long-standing partnership between the Orlando Shakespeare Theater and the University of Central Florida Department of Theater. The production you see involved over 100 very talented artists, designers, directors, technicians, staff, students, and volunteers in order to bring it to fruition. Now, the story of the life and adventures of Nicholas Nickleby, Dickens' third novel, isn't that right, Mr. Dickens, your third novel?
Right, yes.
Oh, third novel.
That is correct.
Very good. It was very, very important to him. Among the issues raised in this novel was a state of boarding schools and orphanages in England at the time. Dickens, in fact, visited one such abusive school in particular, and modeled the darkly comic and sometimes sinister character of Squeers after the headmaster at that school.
William Shaw.
William Shaw.
They would say that to him, I might be sued for libel.
But the play is riddled with very interesting characters like Mr. Squeers, Dickens' eccentric, comical, and often grotesque figures. It's very interesting because Dickens began his writing career, actually, writing descriptions for illustrated plates, such as the ones that we printed off for you here tonight. He was so captivated by these illustrations that he first started off writing captions about them, but then started developing whole stories after them, to the point that before very long, it flipped around to where the illustrations were being created for his lengthy stories. Now, Nicholas Nickleby was originally distributed in this fashion as 18 monthly issues at 1 shilling each and a double issue at the end, periodicals that you get once a month. Each number comprised 32 pages of text and 2 illustrations by this artist, Fizz, which is the alias for Hamlet Knight Brown, whose illustrations are right over there. The David Edgar adaptation of Nicholas Nickleby that you'll see tonight originally opened in June 1980 at the Aldwych Theatre in England, initially for an 8-week run, but it sold out and wound up, the 8.5-hour 2-part production became a sellout, and it played for 2 more seasons at the Aldwych before being filmed at the Old Vic and transferring to Broadway from September of '81 through January of '82. Now this triumph was born really out of a disaster, a near disaster. The Royal Shakespeare Company was faced with a drastic cut in Arts Council funding at the end of 1979. So instead of putting on 2 or 3 new productions in the next season, Trevor Nunn decided to put all the company's resources into one spectacular production. That production, or the production you'll see over the next 2 evenings, is a 6.5-hour later version by David Edgar, and it will use the available resources of both the Orlando Shakespeare Theatre and Theatre UCF. It is our hope to bring you all of the themes, the imagery, the vivid characters, and the action of the original manuscript. And as we move through Nicholas's journey, it's probably good to remember the novelist's original words. Dickens was a writer with a real social conscience, but no real political values. His opinion has been quoted as, "If men were to behave decently, the whole world would be decent." So, to kick that off, I would say, here's defining decency.
Chris, can you talk a little bit about, both you and Jim Helsinger co-directed this piece. So how did that actually work within the rehearsal halls?
We both survived.
Yes.
It's a unique situation because the production is such a massive undertaking that it really requires 2 directors. If one director were to tackle this, you can imagine it would probably rehearse over the span of several months. Given us a normal professional schedule of 4 to 5 weeks to put this all together, we oftentimes were running rehearsals in adjoining rooms, switching back and forth. People have asked me the question, well, did Jim direct part 1 and you directed part 2? That would have been sort of easy, but however, the same characters are in both parts of the play, and oftentimes playing multiple roles. So, through a lot of planning, lots of very complicated grids and whatnot, we figured out where people could be and how we could rehearse these people and those people. So we basically followed different storylines. As you will see, Kate and Nicholas very soon get separated and go along their ways, trying to make their way. And each one of those rehearsals would be happening in different rooms. And as we went along, it became occasionally complex, as maybe these scenes needed a little bit more tweaking, and these scenes were doing pretty well, and it's that constant navigation of figuring out how to put all that together. But Jim and I have worked together extremely well. We're both very satisfied with the result, and we wound up coming up with the production.
It's pretty incredible. Next week at our pre-show speech for part 2, Bert Scott will be here as well, who is our set designer and worked with Jim and Chris to not only figure out how to do both sections at the same time, but also how to facilitate getting people on and off. We started about 9 months ago, actually using the model.
About 9 months ago, we solidified a design, and Bert Scott, the set designer, came up with this gorgeous model of the theater with the set as you will see it tonight, as well as little scale models of every character in the play. So if you have to pop in on Jim and I when we were working about 9 months ago, you could have accused us of playing with dolls. But it took a lot of that planning just to make sure that when we were rehearsing different scenes in a different hall, we knew where people were coming from, where they were going to, how the flow of the entire production was coming along. It's a very interesting process.
I think so. And we'll make sure we have the model when Bert's here next week, so you guys can see that as well if you're going to be here next Friday evening. Does anyone have any questions right now for Chris?
When Charles Dickens wrote this, did he have the plot in his mind from beginning to end, or did he just make up everything what was going to happen?
Did you have the plot?
I had the general idea of which direction I was going, but often the feedback from the readers would influence certain aspects of it. I do like to listen to what my readers said, and that would influence the direction. But the major plot lines, the broad strokes, as it were definitely in place when I started.
I think one of the very interesting things that drives the production is the fact that the characters are so vivid. If you can imagine receiving monthly installments, just as we watch a TV series now, and we can't wait for the next week to find out what's going to happen, the show has that kind of a rhythm. You follow somebody's story for a while, and then somebody's overlaps and takes off, so it has a sense of pulling you along to hopefully find out what happens next.
Well, and talking about someone who gets to make the characters even more vivid and come to life on stage, Jack Smith, our costume designer, is here and brought some materials to show and tell as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's so before I even get started, I have to say it would be very glib for me to be able to tell you how many hundred costumes there were, how many of this, how many of that there were 18 pounds of renderings when I sent them off. So it would be easy for me to do that. But I also, before I even start down that road, want to say that there are 20 plus people who aren't in the room right now who deserve all of the credit for what you're going to see tonight. The costume shop has worked at an unbelievable pace to do what we're doing tonight. This build is a larger build than any of us thought it would be at the beginning or in the middle or even at this point. So those 20 plus people, paid people, volunteers, people who've come in, they really deserve all of the credit for what we're doing. So, talking about process, the RSC, when they first did this play, they played into certain actors' strengths. So in the original script, there were very specific tracks. And a track is, this actor plays these 10 people. For example, one of the things that I loved in the original track was that the actress who played Fanny Squeers also played Mrs. Miss Snettlewici, and ultimately played Madeline Bray. And those were all three, I don't want to say Fanny Interest was a love interest, though she was interested romantically in Nicholas, but the other two definitely were love interests. And the young lady who played those parts was so drastically different in each one that you would never have guessed that was the same person. So those tracks were very clear when we got them, but they were written and tailored towards very specific actors. And then I sat down, so I agreed that I would do this show back in January of last year, really seriously started committing to it. So we had a brief meeting when I was here working on Sense and Sensibility. I went away, we had a couple of phone conferences over the next several months, and then in May, I showed up with 175 renderings, 117 of which were in color at that point. And a color rendering is just basically, what this actor wears. It didn't have the detail pages yet to come along with this. So I knew that for me to get my prelims to them on time in color, that I needed to start coloring them back in February, which meant I was going to show up with a fair number of colored renderings before either of the two directors had seen anything. And that's a leap that a designer rarely makes. Usually you make pencil sketches, we call them thumbnails or pencil sketches. I show up and I say, this is sort of the line I think we're in, here's the color families that I think we're in. But I knew that the pace of this, and I also work at 2 other theaters, so I know what's in my pipeline of things to get done. I knew that I needed to have some color on these guys so we could understand where I thought these characters were going. One of the initial conversations that Chris and Jim and I had was to try and come up with a single costume for every actor that we would then add things to or subtract things from, as much as was humanly possible. We have stayed true to that, I would say, about 60%. You just hit some characters that, there's nothing I'm going to do to this dress that's going to take us there. So, we just need a whole nother world. So you make those choices. But I wanted them to see how that would play out. And so I did all of these color renderings. I came with 2 huge books of renderings, 117 in color, 175. At the end of the day, there were 215 colored renderings that I sent off in 3 books. So it's 3 4-inch binders of renderings, 18 pounds of them. When I took them to the UPS man, he weighed them up and I said, I'm sorry, I have to ask. How many pounds of renderings are these? 18. Oh my gosh, this is by far the largest show I've ever done. So he asked me if I wanted to insure them, and I laughed. He's like, well, yeah. He's like, well, what are they worth? I don't know. Priceless to me right now. So sent them off, and but when I came in May with the 117 in color, I sat down in front of Jim and Chris, and we looked at the model, and we talked about the world that these people are going to live in, and then I started showing them the renderings, and Chris and Jim were sitting across the table from me, turning page after page after page of rendering. Jim and Chris are getting quieter and quieter. I'm thinking, oh goodness, they don't like this, and I'm not going to have time to re-render 117 renderings. I'm in trouble. I get to the point where they're no longer in color, and I say, okay, we're going to be moving into black and white at this point. I can tell you where I think these colors are going to be. Keep going and keep going. We get to the end, and it's just quiet. I've gone down the wrong road. And Jim said, wow, that's amazing. I could have used that a while ago. But so I wanted to show you guys what I was talking about with the color family. It's giving away a little bit of the secret or the magic, and we don't always do that, but you guys are special, so I'll destroy the book doing it. Anne Herring plays a wide variety of people, from a very, very poor flower seller to an over-theatrical wife of a theater artist to a wealthy lady in a shop. I mean, she's all over the place, including the evil Mrs. Squeers. And she is, with the exception of her 2 costumes for the play within the play, only in 1 dress. So you'll see how we did that, but we move things around. Like, she starts in this burgundy dress with the apron and the shawl and the hat. Most of her hats have the hair stitched into them because it's too slow to change a wig, so we just stitch hair into a hat. Then for Mrs. Squeers, she gets a really rough hat, really rough shawl. The apron is more revealed. Still the same burgundy dress. Very wealthy lady, we strip all of the aprons and gap away, and we just see the really beautiful dress with an expensive shawl. We see more of the jewelry. Then as the theatrical Mrs. Crummels, she has a black ruff and a big jewel and a red fan. Then we go to the play within the play, which are entirely different costumes. And then lastly, in the second play, she comes back as Mrs. Snob, and we only see her for a moment, but again, it's aprons and hats and all of that to sort of hide what we're doing. And Jim and Chris, I think, both really liked that. Where we went from there was Jim said, okay, we've looked at the tracks, and even though the RSC has written this character to play these 10, we're going to pull these 5 out and give them to these 4 people, and these 3 things are coming back to this. And so,
I really like that so much.
yeah, I was like, oh, okay. So then I went back and I re-rendered, well, there's a pile of over 60 renderings back in Elon, North Carolina, just standing in the corner as I would go through and go, okay, this went from a guy who was 6'6", and 240 pounds, and now it's a guy that's 5'10" and 90 pounds. So that's, okay, we're just gonna re-render that. Let's go on and we start over. So there's over 60 renderings that are just sitting there, you know, dead to the world. And we finessed it 2 more times where we looked at it and said, no, really, we looked at it and this person's gonna have back-to-back costume changes, we need to move that around. So went through and re-rendered it again, and then all of this stuff went off in October, got here, and possibly the biggest unsung hero, Denise Warner, sat down with 12 inches of renderings and went through and said, okay, this is going to be a build, this is going to be a pull, we can get this, we can, you know, and started sorting out what teams, there were individual teams of people, so there's a draper patterner with cutters and stitchers underneath them. This team is going to do all of this, and this team is going to do all of that. So she did an immense amount of work and is truly an unsung hero. But then we started, I got here December 12th or 13th, started working and was actually stitching stuff on a costume about 20 minutes ago before I came in. I was like, okay, I have to go now. So whatever happens, happens. So that's my process.
Thank you.
Have anybody helping you with the coloring?
No.
You didn't bring in a 9-year-old friend?
No, tempting. My boxer bulldog tried to help on several occasions, but just made more of a mess of it. No, and I've got to the point where with these, I can turn one of these renderings out every about 25 minutes, from drawing, inking, coloring to done. So you get fast, or you get dead. Yeah. No, these are. The detail pages are all done on the computer. So this stuff I import in the images, then I set in the fabric swatches, so Denise can take the fabric and go, oh yeah, I know what this is, that goes over here. This is all done on the computer, with the exception of any patterning details that I hand draw in. And then but the renderings themselves are all hand done, Sharpie marker, watercolor, colored pencil. Yeah, I do. I try and do this for the actors and also for Denise for hair and that sort of thing. I try and find good images, and the great thing about this is 1840s. We set it about 1839, but the daguerreotype starts becoming very popular in the 1840s, and so I have lots of great daguerreotype images. I typed in daguerreotype 1840 one-eyed man, and got 3 or 4 things for Mr. Squeers. So yeah, lots of interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jack is actually going to be, we have a presentation we're going to be doing at the Orange County Downtown Library tomorrow, and Jack is going to be there also speaking a little bit more about the costumes and Victorian dress. So if you're able to attend and are interested in the subject, please stop by. And it's at 11:30. About 45 minutes. And also, we have set up some costume renderings in the lobby. We also have hot-scale models out in the lobby, so please check those out as well, especially during intermission or before the show starts this evening.
Jack, how many costume pieces did we end up with?
Okay, so I sent in 215 renderings, and we've done, I think, Denise and I tried to figure it out the other day. We did, I think, an additional 36 or 37 looks that were based mostly on things that we already had for different characters. But there's a prologue that you guys will see that it's just written as narrators. But then when we got here, certain lines were given to people that would look like the person that Dickens is describing. So I tried to tweak some of the looks, mother and father Nickleby in there, based out of mostly things that we already had for them, or the addition of a different hat or that sort of thing. So we tweaked it a little bit that way. I also, I should mention, I purchased Nicholas Nickleby, the audio book from iTunes, and for about 6 months, all day long and going to sleep, I just listened to the work, and because I had to. There was so much in it that we have trimmed away. Like they described Miss Nickleby, as being a youngish woman of 50 in a yellow dress and a matching hat. And it's like, oh, how are you not going to do Miss Nickleby in a yellow dress with a matching hat? So when you see Miss Nickleby tonight, that's a youngish girl of 50.
So the answer is something over 200.
Yeah, I think if you include the stagehands, I think we're right at 250. Because we also costumed all of the stagehands so that they would look right going into that world. So somewhere around 250. Right. And every look is shoes, socks, petticoats, corsets, dresses, hats, shawls, jewelry, gloves. It's amazing how many pieces it can be. When someone comes up and says, "I've lost my hat," I don't know what to tell you. I don't. We don't have GPS tracking. Though it's tempting. Any other questions?
Sounds exciting.
Thank you. I tell everybody every day, I'm the luckiest guy. I get to do what I love, and people pay me to do it. It's a good thing. Yeah.
When you do so many costumes and they're all beautiful and valuable, what happens to them?
They'll go back into our stock. A bunch of them were built out of UCF in their costume shop and are pulled from UCF stock. And then I plundered Elon stock as well, because I teach at Elon University, so I brought a bunch of our Sweeney Todd down with me. It was like, oh, great, use that, that's good.
Are any of these recycled or are these all?
Always, always. I would say any good design, a third of it's built, a third of it's pulled, and a third of it's purchased. And I would say we're probably closer to half built on this show, just because so many of the things had to be so specific. And we're about 50% built, and the rest is pulled. So yeah, costumes are always recycled. We reuse them and reuse them and reuse them. Thank you.
Last but not least, we have Philip Ingle, who composed several of the songs you will hear tonight at the show.
Hi. So great. How are you this evening? Awesome. So one of the biggest questions I get is, did I really compose 6.5 hours worth of music? No, I composed maybe 15 minutes worth of music, and only 10 of which actually got used. There are 7 instances in the show where the cast sings. Those are the instances I composed. The sound designer, Britt Sandusky, chose all the rest of the music for the show, so what you'll hear going into the acts, out of the acts, some underscoring he did. I composed what the cast sings. Most of it was Mr. Dickens' words. The playwright took text from the novel and wrote it out as songs, and now the cast sings the song to you. One of the songs is original lyrics. In part 2, there's an opera that lasts about 3.5 minutes, and it's a full story in 3.5 minutes, told operatically. That is all original me. I wrote a fun little tale, and then got it translated into Italian, so that'll be fun. Process is pretty simple. I started a piano, write out a melody line based on the lyrics, and then after the melody's set in stone, I chord it out on a piano, find the chordal structure that I like with it, and then I hand it off to a music director, in this case Tara Snyder. That way the cast can start learning the pieces long before they're fully composed. After that, I have to orchestrate it out to fit the instrumentation that we have chosen. So we chose strings, harp, flute, and oboe. Is actually the instrumentation that Britt used in the music that he used for the rest of the show. So I composed within that structure, and then after it was orchestrated and I had ideas of where I wanted things to fall, I then created all the music myself, recorded it all myself. It's actually all computer generated, but it doesn't sound like it. That's the best part. It sounds like the rest of the music in the show. So it's several hours a day sitting in front of my computer with a keyboard and headphones on going, nope, that's wrong, start that again. Now I gotta record the cello part. Oh, missed a note, start it over, record the cello part again. And so yeah, that's pretty much my process. It's been great to work on this show. Christopher was talking about the collaboration between the Shakespeare Theater and UCF. My day job is with UCF. I'm with the theater department there. I'm the audio engineer, and I design a lot of the shows out there, sound-wise as well. So it's been great to be a part of this. It's been a real honor to be a part of this and to really cement that relationship the two companies have together. So. Yeah, I had complete creative control over what the music sounded like. I obviously would get final say from the directors, but I would write out a melody, they would listen to it and say, okay, great, and that was it. So I had pretty much full creative control over how the music sounded in the end.
So any of the music going to be live, it's all going to be recorded?
It's all recorded, all of it. 2 of the songs, there is no music, they just sing it a cappella. But yeah, all of the music is recorded, nothing is live. Couldn't really fit the orchestra on stage.
And how did you choose the instrumentation? You said
Britt Sandusky, the sound designer, in his research found some music that he really liked and played it for Jim and Christopher, and they really loved it. He said, okay, that's the music we want to use for the show. And it was based off of that orchestration that I chose what instruments to write with. So when listening to that music, okay, there's a full string section, there's some flute, there's some harp, there's an oboe, well, now I have my orchestra to write.
You originally listened to a variety of different types of music. Some of them were too broadly symphonic and seemed to fill too much of the story. It wasn't really the size and the scope of what was going on. So you kind of try to match the themes, the feeling of the characters, and create a world before we start defining a palette.
And once that world was created, then I was able to create my music within the scope of that. So it all fits in very nicely together. I actually do teach a couple classes out at UCF. I'm not a professor, I'm just the audio engineer, but I do have an advanced degree, so they let me teach a little bit. So yeah, it's a lot of fun to teach out there. It's a great department to work for.
any further questions for any of our fantastic creative team up here?
How often is recommending
It is extremely rare. This production of Nickleby has only been produced 7 times before in the United States by a professional theater. Fortunately, it does get produced more by smaller community theaters or by universities because they need large cast shows. And because they have so many students. So they're able to produce it, some by high schools and colleges and community theaters. Not often, again, but because it's still an immense show no matter how you look at it. But that is who is able to do it more often. This is the 7th time that it has been produced in the United States. And it has not, it just recently got a little bit of a resurgence. The Lyric Theater did it a few years ago, and Playmakers did it a few years ago recently. So, in the past 5 years. Anything else? Anybody else have any questions? We will be having a post-show opening night reception down in the lower lobby.